I'll let the mayor call that.
Okay, about 10 more seconds to allow those to return to their seats. Okay, we return from closed session. Are there any items to report?
No, thank you.
Okay, please rise and join us with the Pledge of Allegiance led by Vice Mayor Flores and an invocation following. Please remain standing.
Salute, pledge. I pledge allegiance
to the flag
of the United States of America and
to the republic
for which it
stands, one nation,
under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Is there anyone that would like to lead us in an invocation? If not, moment of silence. Okay, thank you. You may be seated. This brings us to oral communications, our online communications. Have we received any?
Your Honor, we did receive a few oral communications that I can go ahead and read into the record at the moment right now.
Please do.
The first oral communication is from Rogelio Ortiz. I am Rogelio Ortiz. I am a U.S. citizen, and I was in a coma for 2 months with COVID-19, and my family had also contracted COVID-19. I came out of the hospital after 4 months on September 25th of 2020. I later called a man by the name of James to tell me what to do about the hearing for my case. And I also asked him to talk with them to change it. The reason why is because the doctors have told us that the recovery time for myself is at least 1 year. However, James told us that they denied our request. I asked James what I had asked before and if we could in any way possible postpone the hearing considering the circumstances. However, to us it seems as if it does not matter to them, and today I come here to explain that I was in a coma for a majority of 2020 in a hospital far away from my own house, and to explain my inability to work after being discharged carrying on into 2021. Day by day, we keep begging and asking for you to understand not just the circumstances above, but also that we were already in the process of hiring a contractor to fix the house up to code. We had already established a date for the contractor to bring the house up to code prior to the notice given. However, we were met with a letter which told us the unjustly and unfairly decision made and that they had given us only 45 days to bring the house up to code. I have explained to you economically that I am not in good enough health and I will not be in good enough health for 2021 either. I plead with you that I am given adequate time to recover from the advice of all my doctors in order for me to fulfill the request of the city. Let it be known that what little money I have now after being in the hospital for 4 months is only reserved for my family and for food. And it is unjust and unfair to not be given an exemption when I was unwillingly in a coma, unconscious, and still barely beginning recovery. Thank you for your time, Rogelio Ortiz. Our second oral communication is from Alfred Wu, Porterville City Council. Other cities have found that clearing encampments without offering any replacement housing simply causes new ones to pop up elsewhere. If individual housing options are not available, allow people who are living unsheltered or in encampments to remain where they are. Thank you, Alfred Wu. Our third oral communication is from Adam Perez. Hi, my name is Adam Perez. I'm a photographer and filmmaker from Visalia covering the Central Valley. I want to submit a few comments about the notice of trespass and cleanup from the Tulare County. When was the last time the encampment was cleared? Was the city notified by the sheriff's office that evictions would take place? If the evictions occur, is the city prepared to deal with the influx of unhoused people? Best, Adam. Our fourth oral communication for tonight is from Cassidy Friend. Hello, I am very concerned for the upcoming evacuation of the homeless folks living along Tule River. According to the Ninth Circuit of Appeals, Martin versus Boyes case, it goes against the Eighth Amendment of cruel and unusual punishment to penalize folks for sleeping outside and living on public property if they have nowhere else to go. This is very harmful to do to folks who are already very vulnerable, especially during a global pandemic midwinter. Please reconsider this evacuation. These folks deserve your respect and consideration. They are your constituents too. Thank you for your time. Cassidy Friend. Our fifth oral communication is from Tack Smith. Hello, I would like to address the upcoming evictions of houseless people. It is an awful and dangerous idea, as well as directly against CDC guidelines, which I will now quote. If individual housing options are not available, allow people who are living unsheltered or in encampments to remain where they are. End quote. Clearing encampments can cause people to disperse throughout the community and break connections with service providers. This increases the potential for infectious disease spread. How is this being justified in the middle of a pandemic winter? This seems like the absolute worst time possible to handle this, yet it is happening all around the Central Valley right now. Why is this happening? As of right now, that appears to be the last oral communications that we have at this point.
Okay, thank you. And I know there'll be another opportunity at the end of the meeting. So at this point, we can move forward with the AB 1234 reports. Of course, this AB 1234 reports are required pursuant to Government Code 53232.3. I will start with the San Joaquin Valley Air Pollution Control District Governing Board meeting that was held on the 17th of December. A few action items took place at that meeting. We adopted some proposed commercial under-fire charbroiling emission reduction strategies. I've talked about this item previously. These are the places that have the actual under-fired charbroiled, which contribute to a lot of pollutants in the air from fat and other things that accumulate because of the process of cooking. These aren't necessarily what you see at Burger King or others. These are actually flames that do produce a toxin from the burning of the fat. So what's happening now is that we're at the Air District looking at incentives and voluntary local action. So what that basically implies is that if a city is willing to take up an ordinance or create through development some standards for location or the best available technology to counteract this pollution, they're looking for that sort of action coming at the community level. We've also adopted proposed amendments to Rule 4311, which has to deal with flaring. Sometimes unused portions of, I'd say, fuel need to be flared in order to burn up what could be something that in a process could be hazardous should it be contained. So flaring is definitely something that we're looking to control. Although there's a few amendments to that and nothing solid, because we're actually through COVID, it's very difficult to add more stringent regulations when businesses are already suffering because of COVID and the economic crisis. There's controls on some steam boilers and generators that are happening, just a little bit better technology to retrofit. There are some thresholds that are dictated through that. But again, just adjusting some pre-existing boiler and steam generator rules for its Rule 4306. Implementation of residential, commercial lawn garden incentive programs. That program helps to replace gas-powered and older model commercial or residential lawn equipment. This is just adding funding, and it's in direct response to Assembly Bill 617, which requires greater community air quality monitoring. So this is just another way to help have a positive effect on that. We approved the staff to report on agricultural burning. Some agricultural burning is still allowed, but there's very few days where you can actually do that. The air quality and the weather needs to be just right to allow that. And last year we had very, very few days where allowed burning happens. And these organizations, agricultural operations, they actually pay to have the opportunity to burn, and sometimes they never do get that opportunity. So there are some transparency that's been added to allowing that to happen as well. CARB has had some issues with, especially grapevines that have a metallic tinsel that the vines grow on, that when they burn that creates another air pollutant that can be hazardous to health. So there's considerations for limiting that. Although I just received a report from the Air District saying that it'll be allowed until February 25th, again, because of delaying planting seasons and keeping these operations functional, especially during the economic crisis. And lastly, the Air District authorized funding for laboratory testing on air quality samples because of COVID. That hadn't been as available as it had been in the past. So they're contracting with some other agencies to make sure that the testing continues for air quality samples. So are there any questions on that? Okay, then we'll move on to the second item, which was the Tule River Tribe signing ceremony, which was the land to trust, where this happened on December 23rd of 2020. It was an event where local officials and dignitaries attended either in person or virtually. I was honored to be able to ask to address them. I did prepare a very congratulatory speech that I had delivered virtually, and I was pleased to hear the comments that were made by those who were also in attendance. I know Councilmember Peñalosa was in attendance at the location, and I don't know if he had anything that he wanted to add. If you may, yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, Mayor. I'll just add that this was to be there was a great opportunity to just see the hard work that's been going on for many years beyond art. I think not even close to the time that I've been on council for 2 years. It's been a 20-year in the making project. So it was a huge, celebration in a way to be part of, and appreciate your remarks, Mayor. The city of Porterville has been moving along this process all along. And I know that as a council as a whole, we've been very supportive of the relocation of the casino. And I very much look forward to working with and congratulating the newly elected tribe and to continue to work with them as we continue the process for this project to become a reality for our city.
Okay, great. Thank you for the comments. And next I will move on to the meeting that happened on January 5th, the Tulare County Regional Transit Agency Finance Committee. We met briefly just to go over some of the previously requested changes to a draft budget for the Regional Transit Agency. Dr. Tusu from Dinuba and myself were on that committee, as well as former Supervisor Crocker. Some of the suggestions for the draft budget were presented to us, as well as fine tuning of some of the budget line items. For example, I think there may have been one for advertising, which was broadened to marketing and some other things. And altogether, the staff was able to prepare a draft budget, which pretty much followed all of the requests that we had. So we were appreciative of that. And I believe that's the only significant item from that meeting. The next item would be the Eastern Tule Groundwater Sustainability Agency, January 7th. That meeting was held virtually, except for a small group that were located, and I believe they were spaced appropriately in one location. Mostly that group consisted of the officers that were presiding over the meeting. And that brings us to one of the first action items was to consider the agency officers, which would be the vice chair, chair, and secretary, which remain the same. The position of chair will remain with Eric Borba, and the vice chair will be Steve Kissling, which the following item was also to consider the committee chairs and vice chairs, which the group decided to keep those all the same as well. Probably because we were in the midst of considering a lot of items and some consistency in decision-making as well as messaging, which seemed like a pretty good idea. Another action item was to engage in a kind of a true up or a second opinion of evaporative transpiration information that we were considering. Land IQ has been giving the group information on consumption in different areas, but it was revealed in the meeting that the white area growers weren't necessarily convinced that that information was the sole information that we should be relying on. So we are deciding to engage another group to have a second group of information presented so that we can verify or at least compare and discuss later as we compare and contrast those two. Another action item taken by the GSA was to engage with the water blueprint for the San Joaquin Valley. This group looks for alternative ways to bring water to our area. We did in the end decide to contribute the sum of $22,000 for a study that will look for alternative ways to supply water to our area. And these ways are not the conventional ways that we see presently. So we're looking to get some better ideas from this group. I did want to mention that amount is proportional to the need for water that you have. So some areas that engage do contribute less, but in the presentation, it was convincing and promising enough to engage in that study. So other than that, I believe that was the only action item taken at that meeting. However, since that meeting, an item that we considered previously in closed sessions was approved. It was an agreement with the Friant Water Authority and Arvin Edison Water Storage District to mitigate damage or undesirable results, I should say, to the canal from subsidence from pumping that's happened in the past. This agreement covers an amount to range between 125 million to 200 million for undesired effects to help mitigate that and engage in the transitional pumping, which allows agricultural water users to ramp down to the recommended and mandated amounts in a period of time. And this agreement also helps to help the GSA from fending off any litigation. This was a pretty big achievement. So glad to see that this was finally agreed to by so many agencies. I believe the paper had an article about that. And I believe that's the last item really to discuss from the GSA. The COVID Ad Hoc Committee that met on January 8th continues to discuss the local needs based on the the pandemic, COVID-19 issues in our area. Topics of discussion were testing sites in our area and the status of vaccines and the schedule that would happen based on the vaccines. We also talked a little bit about local enforcement efforts and really, as we always do, considering the needs of local small businesses and what role we play in that, while we also align that with the efforts that the state is making in the attempts to help small businesses with funding and the like. So we're always looking at how to help the small businesses in our area. We know it's challenging, and so those continues are ongoing, and that we have a testing site that is at the Heritage Center in conjunction with the county, and the city is playing a role in that. And previously we discussed some sites for events that would happen for people to attend spaces that were located in a way to create a better traffic flow. And on Tuesdays, there's a testing site that's happening at the Heritage Center. And I believe there will be some information through the county and also through the city on how to engage in testing, so the citizens will have a local place to do that. And I'm not sure if Councilmember Carrillo or the city manager wanted to add anything to that.
I think you covered it. I have 2 pages of notes, and everything was in there.
Correct, and thank you for mentioning the testing site at the Heritage Center. We had city staff today complimenting county. We had city staff joining county staff in assisting in that testing site today. And there has been social media from the city promoting that site in the hopes that that site will have greater activity. This would be as a supplement to the veterans, which is on a regular schedule. This would be and may have different locations throughout the community as we try to provide better access to the community for testing. But these would be occurring on Tuesdays from 9 a.m. to 3 p.m. Free testing, and simply just need to register, so you get your results usually in about 48 hours.
Great, thank you for giving some more detail on that. The last item that I have to report on is the Tulare County Regional Transit Agency meeting. This is the board of directors meeting that happened on January 11th. We did engage in reorganization of the chairs and vice chairs of that. So Jose Segala will become the chair, or did become the chair, and Greg Gomez became the vice chair of the group. Looking forward to working with them as well. We did appoint committee members to vacancies on committees that we had organized previously. I chose to engage in the policy committee. That way, I think between the finance committee and the policy committee, I can engage with the chair and vice chair and others on the group to keep Porterville in the middle of discussions, as well as help to, for lack of a better word, lead through experience and through the example that Porterville set for transit in our area. So I'm looking forward to working with that group. We did also authorize applications for congested mitigation and air quality grants. That's CMAQ. So we look forward to seeing what happens there. And just also in a connectivity to the AB17 I mentioned from the Air District, I did suggest to them that all actions that we take, we should consider that every improvement we make with transit is at a community level, and that remembering that 617 is a mandate for community level air monitoring. We should also engage those committees set up within those communities that are challenged by air quality, and make sure that we apply ourselves to any grants that an improvement like that might help the group acquire funding for. We did also approve the interim budget that I had mentioned from the Finance Committee. So I'm glad to see that group up and running. Any questions about that?
Mayor,
Yes.
I don't have any questions, but you were doing so well in reporting out that I wanted to backtrack you to item number 3, to the Tule River Improvement JPA.
Yes. Oh, did I miss that?
Yes,
Okay, let me go over that.
thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. You're welcome. I didn't realize that I had missed that one. So I was in attendance for the item number 3, the JPA for Tule River Improvement JPA on January 4th. It was enlightening to see the subject matter that was covered through that meeting in the group. We did get an update on the Success Reservoir Enlargement Project. There are a few things happening with that. They are currently in phase 1, and phase 2 is looking to get started in 2022 and wrap up sometime in 2022. They are in the process of completing the environmental impact report, as well as the NEPA and CEQA documents that are almost complete. They are also looking to change some of the shorebird mitigation efforts that took place because of the last study in 1999. Because of changes in our environment, there have been some changes in the migration of these shorebirds. So the mitigation factors have changed slightly. There's also 50% acquisition of the property that they'll need to complete the project. Those are ongoing, and there are some problematic areas that have wells and ponds that people rely on, but those negotiations are still happening, and there was no indication that would jeopardize the project. It was just a matter of finding out how to accommodate the necessity for those wells and ponds in a different location and how that would happen. There was also some information given that there was no real plan for major releases of water to in the foreseeable future. Also, there was a call for funds for the funding related to channel clearing, which helps to keep the water flowing free of debris and free of overgrowth. So there was a quarterly call for funds for that. And I believe that completes that report, unless Mr. Knight has any information that I missed.
No, nothing more to report. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, and so the final report, the California League of Cities Homeless Roundtable. I believe Councilmember Peñalosa and Vice Mayor Flores were there. Councilmember Peñalosa, did you have anything that you wanted to report from the roundtable?
Yes, Your Honor. I'll just do a quick recap of what a terrific roundtable we had on January 13th. It was an early morning roundtable. We had over 100 people that participated across the state of California, elected mayors, vice mayors, city council members. It was great to hear who was on the call and having a very dynamic conversation around homelessness in the state. We first began with an introduction with it was a roundtable hosted by the League of California Cities, or Cal Cities now, and they provided a very good overview of the current pieces of legislation moving along at the federal level, and as well as the state level, in terms of funding for homelessness, and it was great to just hear and be listening to what's coming to California and what's being proposed in the state of California, as well as the federal package aid that could potentially provide some rental assistance for folks in the future. And it was just overall great to get to hear about what are the challenges that other cities are having around homelessness. Also, what are some opportunities that folks are pushing forward in their respected communities. And I really look forward to continuing to be part of these roundtable discussions as we, as a city of Porterville, continue to work on this issue that is impacting our city as well. And so I would say that, at the end of the day, I strongly believe that we need to address homelessness in a humane way as well, and also in a very logical and smart way as well as we move along. And so really glad that they had this roundtable, and I very much look forward to any future ones that they may host. And I know that the Vice Mayor was also there, and I'll defer to her if she has any other additional comments.
Thank you very much for that. Actually, as being such an advocate for the subject matter of homelessness and to the services and the allocations, I too was a participant with the knowledge that the purpose of the roundtable was for cities to address homelessness. And in the midst of the pandemic, the winter weather, and how surrounding large and small cities statewide were assisting those who were experiencing homelessness, but in particular to share the ideas. The roundtable discussions, they were participant and are participant driven to provide the collaboration with the other cities. We are all understanding that funding to a lot of the programs is important. Mr. Ryan, who immediately began to talk about, he highlighted about the state, the 1.4 billion for the counties and for the cities. It's just a brief highlight on the 2.6 billion, which were federal funds for individuals to prevent homelessness and evictions. An emphasis was on the 500 million for low-income tax credits and the need for affordable housing. This program provides grants to the cities, counties, and developers to help build the affordable housing. And of course, the 750 million to expand, which started as Project Room Key, then went to Project Home Key. This is the program for hotels and motels. And this is something that has worked in some cities, and for others, it's still a work in progress, especially in counties, plural. It was beneficial for me to hear what other cities were actually doing, and with the knowledge that a lot of these cities were populations that were much larger than ours to those that were very few in the thousands, which was brought to the table. And what was shared were issues that all of us are addressing, especially with coronavirus, that the record number of homelessness, the concern as to where it will be in the next couple of years, the Project Room Key and the large encampments has been an increase. And where the large encampments fell into the discussion were, they were hoping to see if some of the Project Room Key availability could be help and assist some of those that were in the encampments. They spoke of in their cities, their process of moving people from one encampment and how not everyone wanted to go to a shelter. What was spoke from another city were the trespassing notices with the law enforcement, the vacant property, and the ownerships, and how important it was to work together. Then there were shelter programs and providing the resources. a scenario was given which I took light to, because one of the cities stated that their property was in city property. However, it was in the county, and they spoke of the river. They spoke how they had to be careful, how important it was to plan for the ongoing, the maintenance, and how it is important to work with collaboratively between the county and the city when the noticing to move people from one place to another, which is a highlight. These meetings are going to continue. 1 hour was too short, obviously, because it was so much to discuss and for people to chime in. As I heard what other cities were doing, large and small, I was pleased that the city of Porterville has taken the proactive measures and the supportive measures to address homelessness, because we are the first city in this county with the navigation and the welcome center. Now, I'm going to just kind of divert for a brief moment to Mr. Lawless with regard to the noticing and the encampments, because I don't believe we have gotten any noticing on that.
That's correct, Vice Mayor. Although you did read about this occurring in the Visalia area and the St. Johns River, I believe a week or two ago, um, which occurred on private property. It is, I would say, apparent from the comments it received in public comment that similarly this is occurring outside the city. I would assume, because that is where the sheriff would have jurisdiction to be able to do enforcement of no trespassing on private property in the Tule River area. But again, there's not been coordination with the city on that, and certainly it kind of speaks to your comment, is that there's, in matters like these, that there should be some matter of coordination between a city and a county, even if it's occurring just outside city limits on private property.
Thank you. That concludes my portion of it, Mayor.
I think it's on mute, Mayor.
Thank you for those reports, and I'm happy to hear, and I think the tone of your reports at least reflects an engagement, or at least an increased engagement in the region, and I'm proud that that you represent Porterville as one of the leaders in this effort. So thank you.
Mayor, may I add something really quickly?
Please.
So I know that around homelessness, there seems to be a lot of movement happening, and I think with the Navigation Center and the Link Committee, if it would be appropriate, I think that in terms of the public knowing what we're doing with homelessness, I think it would be great if we had a report, an AB 1234 report, where we can share out information about what is happening and updating the public about homelessness and what the city's working on, because I feel like it would be beneficial for us to share that in our public meetings, but not sure how we can maybe move along to adding that to agenda item, or whether we can make that determination today, or how would that work for us to
I think
consider
it should be
that?
added as a staff report, right? One of the many staff, after, because usually you guys go through AB 1234 reports, and then we have staff reports, so we could give an update if the council so desires on the what the city's doing with regard to the homelessness issues specifically.
Yeah, we can certainly do that. And this is a lot of, forgive me for jumping in, I don't mean to intercede. A lot of moving parts. I was already going to tell you, we learned today that the point in time count is not going to happen this year. This has already have been suspended in other jurisdictions. Our local, the name escapes me, of the body that oversees this, Kingston Area Homeless Alliance Continuum of Care, made that decision that they're not going to do the point in time survey due to the ongoing pandemic. There will be a rough count, I guess, based upon who's housed and housing available, but there will not be a homeless, unhoused count that happens this year because of this. And so I think there's a lot of from the governor's proposed budget, which has perhaps funds, as the vice mayor referenced in her talking about additional project Home Key, as it's called, which the city had previously submitted projects for consideration by the county of Tulare for funding, which the 5 projects that were submitted were not selected. So I think if it would help and kind of help shape this, we can certainly provide a staff report and maybe even do it as a scheduled matter so that the city council can spend some time deliberating if it would like around the issues of issues addressed in involving homelessness.
Yeah, I agree, and I think that whether it's a staff report that, as the information kind of culminates, it becomes a scheduled matter, similar to other maybe states of emergency that we have. We have a continuing run on the information because I think that a lot of our efforts. We've taken efforts to be able to be prepared for actions that have taken to move people by being prepared with the navigation center. Coordination would be very helpful in making sure that that happens. And so by relaying information, hopefully the circle will revolve around to having that coordination. So I would agree with that if that's possible to do. And I appreciate that recommendation.
May I chime in one more time?
Yes, please.
Homelessness. And I would have to believe that we also would probably like to invite Ms. Ketcheside, the director of Turning Point, to provide it, who is the person that is running the navigation center, to provide us with a report in early February of some sort to that regard, because from where we were when we were open and to where we are now, and what has been dealt with during the pandemic and the services, because we're still continuing on the task force that I serve on to be very proactive, to bring a lot of the services into the local area. And I know that she is a big instrument to being able to provide us with a lot of those services, because she has been working very productively with our community development. And so I believe that we should extend the courtesy and invite her to come and give us a report in early February.
Yeah, I agree. And that helps to illustrate to the healthcare community as well as the county, who has some responsibility in supporting that activity. And it will illustrate the needs maybe of what needs to happen rather than the actions they decide to undertake without coordination. So I appreciate that.
I have no further comments.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, and I would just like to add, Mayor, no, I appreciate the Vice Mayor's comments. I agree with that 100%. I think that's a great, terrific idea. If we can invite the director for the Navigation Center to be part of those conversations as we continue to address this in our community. But thank you for the time, Your Honor.
Thank you. And we can move on to the staff informational reports.
Thank you, Honor. There's 4 reports that have been provided. The first was an update with regards to the Henry Street project. CSUD has begun doing some of the property improvements that they had received grant funding for. And so finally glad to see progress being made on that. Mr. Moore and I have been in communication with that and hope to get more information from CSUD about next steps or as other grant funding they have indicated they've received to be able to continue to do improvements at that property. So wanted to bring that to the council's attention. Also, you have your monthly water conservation update. We are seeing increased water utilization in comparison to 2013. We did see what's equivalent to a 4.65% increase in water production in December, which dragged down a little bit of our cumulative conservation, which the target is 26%, and it brought us to 25.7% cumulative. On that, we did issue 3 notices of violation and 1 administrative citation through code enforcement for water utilization. Mr. Knight did bring to my attention as he and I were discussing that because we are seeing a little bit of an oscillation. We've had new schools on our system, been recently added to the city system. In addition to that, so that both school districts have added at Porterville Military Academy as well as Burton School District in their Summit Charter Intermediate. And then in addition to that, there's been 3,000 new residential connections since 2013 in the city. So, as we're held accountable to 2013, recognize that there's a lot more customers and other things that are not necessarily factored into those to that. So, but I thought I would bring that. That's your monthly report on that. Library planning update, reporting that the temporary facility is close to being turned over by the developer to the city. We've engaged the services of an architect to put together plans, which we hope to be able to have soon and be out to bid so we can begin making improvements on that facility and in hopes of having it open when it can be open. I would say targeting the summer time frame, I would say. And then lastly, a rescue mission update, which was the council had asked to be provided the status of what was the result from its November meeting, which was they're calling for an inspection, which and for showing progress, which did occur in the early part of January, prior to the 6 months that was necessary for an inspection to be called. There will be, consistent with the conditional use permit, there will be a full report as a scheduled matter on the council agenda for your next meeting. Answer any questions on any of those reports.
Any questions?
Mayor, I do.
Yes.
In terms of the Henry Park improvements, I just wanted to get a correction. I would assume that it was March 2021 because it has March 2020 on there as the beginning of the improvements, but I just want to make sure as I'm looking at the report out for the Henry Street Park improvements.
When they would be done?
Yeah, I know the report says that the plan to complete the first phase of restoring the waterway to the Henry Street property pond by March 2020, but is that March 2021?
Yeah, obviously be 2021.
Yeah, I was just making sure because
that was
like,
probably it's been waiting that long. That was probably the objective.
All right, sounds good. Thank you. Just wanted to double check because I think that's a great project. I'm so glad that we got some funds for that. So look forward to seeing that completed. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for those. Unless there's any more questions, thank you for those reports. We'll move on to the consent calendar. All consent calendar items are considered routine and will be enacted in one motion. There will be no separate discussion of these matters unless a request is made, in which event the item will be removed from the consent calendar. All items removed from the consent calendar for further discussion will be heard at the end of scheduled matters.
Mayor,
Council. Yes.
Mayor, if there are no items to be pulled or for discussion and there are no conflicts, I make the motion that we accept items 1 through 14 of the consent calendar.
Okay, we have a motion. Is there a second?
I will second.
Okay. We have a motion and a second. Do we have a roll call vote?
Aye.
Councilmember Peñalosa,
Aye.
Councilmember Stowe,
Aye.
Vice Mayor Flores,
Aye.
Mayor Reyes.
Aye. Passes 5-0. Thank you. We will move on to scheduled matters. Item 15.
Thank you, Your Honor. We have 3 scheduled matters before the City Council this evening. The first is consider the of appointment to the transaction and use tax measure H we call it Measure H, or the two talk oversight committee, and Ms. Hildreth will provide the staff report.
Thank you, Mr. Lawless. Mayor, members of council. As previously reported to the council, 2 vacancies do currently exist on the Transactions and Use Tax Oversight Committee, with both of those seats having terms expiring in May 2024. And as you know, 2TALK is charged with reviewing the revenue and expenditures of the budgets for both Measure H and Measure I, and to report those findings to the City Council. It is comprised of 10 members of the public, each serving 4-year terms. And then the committee is required to meet at least once annually. However, its recent practice is to meet more than that, typically on a quarterly basis. To be eligible for appointment, individuals must either be a Porterville resident, a business owner, or a business operator. Staff is in receipt of 1 request for appointment from Ms. Angela Dennis, and that request for appointment was provided in the council's packet. It is staff's recommendation at this time that the City Council consider the appointment of Ms. Angela Dennis to the Transactions and Use Tax Oversight Committee and to fill one of the 2 vacancies with a term expiring in May 2024. That is staff's report, and I'm available for questions. Thank you.
Thank you for the report. Councilmember Carrillo, did you have any questions?
I do not.
Thank you. Councilmember Stowe, did you have any questions about the appointment?
No, I don't, Your Honor. Thanks.
Councilmember Peñalosa?
I don't have a question, just a comment that these, committees, city committee and commissions are very important, and to advise the City Council on different committees, that people serve on to make recommendations to us. And so it is always nice to see folks that are applying for these committees and commissions. I myself began my interaction with the city was in the Animal Control Commission. So I'm always grateful for folks to commit to volunteering on these commissions. So that's all I wanted to say.
Thank you. Vice Mayor, any questions or comments?
Oh, I don't have any questions or comments. If there is nothing else to say, I would like to make the recommendation that we accept the appointment of Angela Dennis to the 2TALK committee and to fill one of the 2 vacancies with the term expiring in May of 2024.
And I'll go ahead and second that. And just to say that, as Councilmember Peñalosa commented, first being a member of 2TALK, also being the secretary, and then eventually the chairman, I recognize that this committee sometimes doesn't have the content that really is something that people are excited by. In reality, it's very it's numbers based, and also it requires a great deal of discussion and consensus, and having a committee filled out like this, especially as we move into times when libraries are being considered with the literacy factor, as well as public safety, the ever evolving public safety in our world. I think it's important to have people engaged. So with that, a motion and a second, we'll have a roll call vote, please.
Councilmember Carrillo,
Aye.
Councilmember Peñalosa,
Aye.
Councilmember Stowe,
Aye.
Vice Mayor Flores,
Aye.
Mayor Reyes.
Aye. It passes 5-0. Thank you. Next item is item 16, consideration of the City Council's Procedural Handbook.
Thank you, Your Honor. It's been customary of the City Council upon its seating that it take up and consider its essentially its rules. Many bodies, governing bodies, have a set of procedures or rules that it follows in terms of its operations, and so the City Council's Procedural Handbook attempts to address some of those procedural types of things, how its agenda is prepared, how matters are considered, times of distribution, and things like that. And I would say it's a living document that each council is given an opportunity to review and to amend should it decide to do so. And it can be done at any time, I guess I would say, but it's been customary for this being really your first meeting of the year, and really only the second meeting of this body that it consider its procedures, and if wishes to make any amendments to it, and or provide any direction to staff deem necessary.
Great, and thank you for the briefing on that. And as you know, as times move forward, circumstances change. As I think the last edits included details of our districts and courtesies related to districts. So one thing that we know is that a document like this doesn't stay the same forever. So at this point, we can discuss any additions or any other further definitions of what is inside the document. As you all know, this is how we conduct ourselves and how we understand others to conduct themselves. So I'd like to open it for discussion. I can, Councilmember Carrillo, did you have any questions about the document or its contents or suggestions regarding it?
I don't have any suggestions for revisions or anything like that. Still just getting familiar with it. So.
Okay, and please feel free that at any time I go to you first often just as a rotational way to ask. So feel free to come back if you do find that any other conversation spurs on a question or a suggestion. Councilmember Stode, did you have anything to add?
No, as I read through it, Your Honor, I think last time we went through this procedural book, we did a pretty good job on it. So I don't have any additions or deletions. At least not as, no, I don't.
Councilmember Peñalosa?
Yes, Mayor. I just had a quick question, and not sure who can answer it, but I know I know that with the pandemic, we've decided to move not move, but provide electronic participation for council meetings. Does it just, if we were to have that permanently, have a permanent option for folks to participate, does that even have to be on the procedure handbook, or that doesn't really matter? I'm just curious to know. I'm not sure. That was a question I had.
I think you probably, if you're going to have it extend beyond the pandemic, it's something the council could certainly consider, since you're not required to do it. And in fact, I mean, the only difficulty with trying to do something about that now is that we are operating under special rules for what's allowed. And I'm not sure what, it's very, it's not unlikely necessarily that the state won't change the rules and won't allow it to become a more permissive way to hold city council meetings. But you might want to wait on making changes to the handbook to see what is left, what they end up allowing after post-pandemic, so to speak, because it's kind of hard to sort of predict what they will and will not allow. But that's potential. I mean, I can't imagine that we won't see some more allowances for that in the future.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, it's just a question. I know that it's probably premature to think about putting it, but it was a question of maybe in the long-term part of it, once we get there and we find out what's going to happen, if it would make sense for us to add it to the procedure handbook. But it was the only question that I had, Mayor. Thank you.
I expect there will be some interesting, that they'll still have this, they'll still be trying to make sure that they are ensuring public participation as easily as possible. So it's hard to look into the crystal ball and know what the laws will look like, after the pandemic, because there's a lot more permissions allowed given the emergency that's going on right now.
Yeah.
And I think even for us, you know, circumstances were allowed previously for us to be able to phone in. And I remember Councilmember Ward, our former Vice Mayor Ward, would often use remote access, but and the city attorney is correct. In those previous times, they would have to post his location, and it would become public where you were doing it from. So those things are now a little bit more lax than they were to be able to get everybody involved. But I agree that even Zoom is far more functional for council members and everyone else than the phone was, because there were some times where that was prohibitive to people hearing, or even connectivity issues, even worse than Zoom. So, but it's definitely something to keep on the radar. Vice Mayor?
You could tell I had something on my mind. One of the things that has been on attentive and on the radar. Okay, when I was looking through the council member handbook, I was making reference to page 25, where we have resolutions for the order of business, the ticket policy, etc., the electronic device, internet, and email. And then, of course, the retention policy. I'm going to come up with, of course, that the council acts as a body and not individually. And I'm referring to what I would like to see is a policy or a guideline with social media and government on the platforms such as Facebook, Twitter, Snapchat, Instagram, and whatever other platforms they may be, more of an administrative policy which defines what the agency policy covers as the official agency account, and a clear guidance for elected officials as to what can and cannot be done via the social media platforms. And of course, somewhere in there, the assessment of risk tolerances that pertain to the laws, such as the California Public Records Act and the Brown Act, and what is public and what is private. For example, the personal posts by elected officials and how they would be interpreted, and to recognize the personal, public, and official government account, the links to official accounts, and to avoid any type of a serial posting, but to clarify the definitions. There's a lot. That's all new
That's
for
a
all.
lot. Okay.
That's a lot, but that's what's been going on my mind. And
A lot on your mind, Vice Mayor. I understand. I actually, so you know, you bring up a good point though, because AB 992 is the new rule that governs social media postings, and we probably should address that. And it's not exactly, you know, it's a little confusing to kind of sort through what you can and cannot do. So I can certainly take a crack at that and kind of help, you know, formulate some guidelines based around what's now legally permitted. And also, you know, the balance between that and the First Amendment issues, because you have First Amendment on the other side of this coin. And so, so I can, if the council so desires, we could add something to that effect. So, because that is something new since,
it is,
you know, especially since this was last approved.
thank you. This is why I bring it up, because it is new and it has changed, and we need to have that guidance and clarity. And so, yeah, that's what's been on my mind, and I pretty much am would like to see something to this regard.
Thank you. I had a couple of things that I wanted to talk about, and it kind of deals with the handbook in general. I guess as a result of the direction that's within there, but I'll start with a couple of the suggestions that I have. A policy on the use of the logo for the city. I think that it should be clearly defined how, because I'll give an example. If I've been asked to participate on a show previously on the radio or on the podcast, and although it may not be clear to what capacity they're asking me. I always presume it's the capacity in which I serve, and I always temper my answers with being representative of the entire group. But at times they can look to have me represent something other than that, which is not favorable to the way I approach things. So the logo and the determination of when to use it, I think, needs to have a little bit more definition, as even going far enough for the council member to have some responsibility to correct should there be a misuse of the logo, and also to report to the council should they be doing something that not only uses the logo but attempts to define what the council's thought as a body is. I say this because should the logo be used incorrectly, there are, in the past, I believe there are instances of cease and desist letters being sent. And this is to say that it being used for a purpose that is not intended. An example would be a commercial use or a misrepresentation of the council. So that it's sort of aligned with social media as the marketing and advertising has kind of changed to be more of a digital approach. I think it can help protect the symbol which we, other than the flag of the nation and the state, the other symbol that we serve under, which is the seal of the city of Porterville. So some definition on the use of the logo and corrective action responsibility if we do experience that being kind of thrust upon us, as well as similar, I guess related to that, is a clearer definition. And I've seen it within the digital devices and things about campaign activities versus council activities. It's kind of in the same vein with social media, the logo, and maybe a little bit clearer, I guess, definition of what that line looks like. And then I think the last thing is, if we have these guidelines, we presume that we'll all follow them, but what happens? What are the steps taken should anyone, present or future, decide not to undertake them repeatedly? And what course of action does the council have? Because other than being a thin pamphlet or booklet that we carry with us and update every once in a while, there should be some way to look at following this through as a living, breathing document, but also a purpose to adhering to it, which I haven't seen in there. I know there's actions that can be taken, and I'm not talking about removing anyone or doing anything like that. It's just simple as a reminder, and so that there's no gray lines or gray area for people coming on board or as the circumstances change throughout our terms. I think we would all appreciate a little clarity, and I understand that the definition may not be there yet to give that clarity, but the journey to get there, I think, would be helped by just starting to put something in the text. And I know that's a lot too, but I think there's some relation to what the vice mayor said and what I'm talking about too.
Yeah. Okay. So I think so the digital stuff, yeah, I can work on that. I think I was taking notes while you were kind of going through it. Again, there's the issue of, there's a couple things operating here. And I'm not sure, I'll have to go check and see. There's a policy that if we don't already have it, we need it obviously, which is just on when the city seal can be used. And then there's which really is kind of separate and apart from the handbook. But then there's the issue of, then council members are going to, it's incumbent on the council members that if they're involved in something where the seal or some kind of is used, you want to make sure that it's not, especially if it's for you, obviously not for campaign activities, shouldn't be used for that, but you need better definition of what that is so everybody understands what that means. And so I think I kind of understand where you're going with that. And then when you're talking about remedies, so when it comes to remedies, you're right. I mean, you're not going to ever be removing each other from office, because really that's the job for the electors, right? So there's,
Correct.
I mean, there's usually extremely limited circumstances on where any that kind of action would ever be appropriate. And frankly, it doesn't really need to be in your city council handbook, because it's going to be governed completely and solely by what is allowed by law. So that's that. Now, short of that, you have, probably the most severe thing you can do is something called censure. And that is basically a public scolding of the official. I mean, that's really no other way to put it. It's like an official record of that. And in order to even do that, due process is needed. So I can look at some parameters for what that looks like. And there are lesser actions short of that too. If that's kind of where you're going, that's the only remedies that really are, for the most part available. So, but even censure has its limits. I mean, you have to, sometimes and that's why it's real, you want to be careful that you like that. That's why I bring things up like the First Amendment. You want to make sure that you're not crossing over into that area with your procedural restrictions, because, there are times where if that were to be the case and you were to engage in censure, but it was allowed by the law, then, the courts, although deferential to censure, because it's really not a very, there's not a lot of teeth to that enforcement mechanism, they have been known to send them back from time to time if they believe it wasn't appropriate because it wasn't in conformance with the law. But yeah, I don't think we've ever specifically had a process for that, but if that council's direction is to do that, we can certainly bring something back to amend the handbook.
Yeah, and it doesn't have to be, fully cooked and the first attempt. I think it's just something we look at especially as we move into districts further, and the lines are drawn differently, and situationally our constituents have different tools available to them, and I think some of the divisions that people express, I think, play into our ability to try and keep a civil way of handling ourselves as a body without injecting the uncertainty of those who wish to create any sort of division amongst us, if that makes any sense. But I think you summed it up, and I definitely wouldn't look for anything harsh. It's just guidelines without any kind of thing to round it off from what I see.
Are we including this to subtly or prevent a council person to subtly advertise or promote his own well-being? Like for instance, he says that I did this with this park, we got it done, when it takes 3 council people to do it. Is that what this is about?
That could be a part of something that, because a statement like that could reflect that somebody single-handedly did or was unable to do something that could signify to the public what our operational standards are. And I think that when we each are chosen to by ourselves or by whoever the radio or social media person is, I think it's our responsibility to first speak of what the council's actions are, what the council's decisions have been, without crossing the realm into open criticism of those actions as a way to set yourself apart from the body while you're speaking under the seal of the city. I think that, and I know that's a hard thing to do, because you'll be questioned and asked things that maybe lead in that direction. But I think as a practice, when I'm asked to be on the radio or on Hopper, I at least mention it to the rest of the group, things like that, so that they're aware. If they hear something I said, please chastise me if I misrepresent your thoughts through our actions. That's what I would say. And I think just as a way for us to not create miscommunication in the public, definitely transparency is important, but making sure that we're honest about what we're saying is also important.
Yeah, may I say something?
Please.
No, yeah, I agree with all that. You know, I think as I became, I know Councilmember Stowe, we were the first ones in our districts to officially move into districts, and it kind of has changed the dynamic. And I know that I myself am really, I'm wanting to do a lot more in the district in terms of sharing out information using different platforms to do that. So I think this is very appropriate to have in the handbook to discuss what are the protocols, because as of right now, there isn't a much to follow, right? And so I think it makes perfect sense to do that as we continue to function as district representatives, which I think it's important that we do have these protocols, both in the social media realm of how to share out information, what are the protocols, guidelines for that as council, and along with like the protocols for if I were to have a town hall meeting, right? I know I had one 2 years ago, and whether we add in the handbook, like sending it out to the council prior to doing it, even if it's just something that it's involving one council member if one council member is doing all the work, renting out the facilities, all that, okay, great. But at least, maybe having like a protocol where a council member is going to notify the rest of the council that this is happening in other matters, or when would that be appropriate, or, I guess having those protocols is very important to make sure that we're working as a cohesive body, but also balancing that with the fact that we are district representatives, right? So I'm in agreement with both Vice Mayor Mayor's recommendations to figuring out what that looks like, and of course bringing it back for us to review to make sure we can hash those details out.
I thought we included that in the handbook the last time we revised it, just a couple of years ago, if I'm not, or maybe I'm mistaken. I thought I read that somewhere.
We did have a courtesy for inter-district information, and I think that kind of touches on what we're talking about, but things have kind of grown a little bit. Only an example is, even Councilmember Peñalosa, some of the things that he's undertaken can set a higher standard for the engagement with the community, but that's only if we all are aware of them and if we're adopting them as a body. And the body can use those standards as well as the individual at a district level. But if there's if it's only happening in one place or another, I think it can be confusing, because some people only seek information in certain places, and it may misrepresent the entire effort, because we all may be trying our best to get information out, but we're just not using the same channel or aware of a channel that exists. And I think that the bar, maybe not the bar, but the standards of outreach may have changed since this document started, and even since we have updated it. So I agree, Councilmember Peñalosa.
Mayor, may I chime in with a comment?
Yes, please.
The courtesies, of course, when we looked at the council handbook a couple of years ago to work with your council member within the district, I'm going to use this as a scenario and as an example, only as an analogy. There was a constituent at that time, Councilmember Garola's district, who called me. As a courtesy, I reached out to Councilmember Garola and let her know that the constituent called and this was the issue, to keep her in the loop, that it was that district and who it was, and that I would be addressing it and bringing it to council with her knowledge. And it was because it was with regard to the mosquitoes. And so this is what I'm saying, to have those courtesies and at least notify the council member that this is going on in the district. And it's okay for other constituents to reach out to members of council, because we are here to represent everyone. as a body because we're working, collectively.
Yeah, you actually have that provision. It's on page 12 of the handbook,
Yeah,
the provision that
yeah.
says,
'Cause I thought that's one.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
I thought that was there. So that's in there. Good.
Yeah, and it's just a simple statement, and maybe, and I think that's what you guys are getting at, though. There may be some need for some elaboration, given it's never been easier, right? For to
Yeah.
disseminate information, to be, to be out. There's so many different platforms for expressing yourself, right? So which has it's also as with as many platforms, there are now just as many, if not more, pitfalls
Correct.
with engaging in those. So
Yeah, and in addition to the vice mayor's comment, I would say that I don't know if it's kind of, first of all, it's hard, whenever to set a standard when we're mostly doing this as public service, right? We're not working this as full-time employees, which makes it a little bit more hard because, what maybe one council member can do with their free time, another council member cannot do, right? So it's just, it makes it really difficult, I think. But I think if we can identify those protocols would be great. The other thing is, I'm curious to know how we want to handle, and this is like the scenario, I'm going to follow the same scenario that Vice Mayor mentioned. So what if, for example, they would have reached out to the Vice Mayor about the mosquito abatement, and then you forward it to the council member, respected council member, but the council member doesn't really want to do much with that issue, right? So then they don't want to, but then it's an issue that maybe you, as the first recipient of that contact, you're like, maybe we should do something like that, right? So what is the protocol for that to exist where if that other person that you refer to, the councilwoman in that case, and that, Councilmember Virginia would have said, I'm not going to respond back, and I don't really care about that issue, right? So then at what point would the vice mayor would have said, oh, well, well, I'm going to take lead then on this because, you may not think it's important. I think I don't know how that's going to function out, but I think there has to be something where, that because then that constituent is going to be like, well, then who do I reach out to if my representative doesn't want to help me, right? So
well, and there's a reason why there's a reason why and that's what we'll have to look at, because the balance here is there's a reason why we didn't go any further, right? The statement just says simply, when that occurs, the council member agrees to advise the appropriate council member of the contact in the matter of concern. Because you're right. I mean, legally, there's nothing that prohibits intra-district interactions with constituents. And something brought to your attention by a constituent in another district can become a concern of yours in your own district. There's absolutely, and that is fair game, right? There's nothing that would prohibit that. And nor would I ever recommend that you go as far as to say, no, you absolutely aren't allowed to engage with that constituent. I think the whole point of this was a notification issue. So that way you have the district, the in-district council member is now aware of it, right? So that's, I think,
Well, and Counselor, in that situation, wouldn't you just ask to place it on the agenda at a council meeting, and if all the rest of the councilmen says yes,
right,
we put it on there. Otherwise, it's just
it doesn't fall through the cracks, right? Yeah.
If I may, this reminds me of, it's been a good 8 years ago, but I'll tell you, I guess this was one of the cautionaries that we talked about as the city was going to transition to districts, in terms of what the influence is of that representative to that district versus being community-based. It reminded me of a graffiti issue that was occurring outside the city in a county area, coming into the city, and there was a member of council that had reached out to, at that time, our board of it wasn't Supervisor Townsend at that time, but reached out to Supervisor Ennis to say, this is it's not in the city, it's in the county, and there's this graffiti issue, and it was dealing with gang affiliated graffiti, and it was a challenge. It was challenging for him because it wasn't in his district. It was in one of the neighboring districts. And so trying to get cooperation with that other supervisor when it isn't your representative was very challenging. And it took, ultimately it was addressed, but that kind of speaks to, I think, was one of the cautionary tales of the city's transition to district, is hopefully it wouldn't be that siloed, that as the city. And again, this wasn't in the city, this was in a county area. So we couldn't do graffiti abatement on it. We needed cooperation from the county, but it was much more difficult.
Right. You still want to be able to act as a body, you know,
For the broader good of the,
right.
for the broader good of the community, but it was
Right.
certainly deferred to supervisorial discretion.
Because when you vote on things, you're still voting as at large, right? So you're still approving something for the entire community. So it's a balance of wanting to be notified and be aware of what's going on and when your constituents are having issues within your district without actually being the type of council where, oh, that's not my district, not my problem. Because you don't want that to happen because you're so concerned about stepping on the toes of your council member, but you definitely want to make sure that every council member is in the loop on all the issues going on within their district.
But at the same time, we don't want to be 5 separate districts.
Yeah.
I've seen that happen. I worked in a city where that happened, and it just divides everything. You know, once 3 of us says that we're going to do something, that means all 5 of us said we're going to do something. You know, we just don't go out and badmouth, well, I didn't vote for it. Those idiots voted for it. You know, let's just say, well, that's what we decided as a council and whatever, and try to be cordial about it. But I think one of the divide a city up real quick, you start acting that way, and it certainly will. That's the reason I'm against district, and I really am, because we don't, in most cities, they don't work for as a whole for their community. They work for their district, and I just, you know, that's just not right. You got to look at the community as a whole.
Yeah, I agree, and I think just to kind of illustrate, I think the points that Councilmember Peñalosa and Stowe made, that when it's potentially a positive outcome, another council member may have a better idea than a solution that a different council member tried to come up with or was at their wits' end to try and address. And in which case, a positive outcome is enlisting the help of someone, a colleague, to accomplish something that's for the benefit of the city. And I think that that's always welcome, and as far as cooperation. And if it's a negative outcome, it goes to what Councilmember Stowe said, that it leads to the deliberative process of information and being able to have a background. Whether if you disagree, then you have a vote should the item come up. And I think that it's the contention that would bring the item to the agenda. But the positive outcome, I don't think is something that would reflect on either council member, because the constituent would have it resolved no matter who was able to do it. And if it's done cooperatively or the perception is cooperatively, I think that that's just as good. Okay. I know that was a lot, and I appreciate the dialogue.
We can take a crack at least to get the discussion, you know, further down the line. Whatever we have will definitely be jumping off points, but we can do that.
Great. And so that's just kind of guidance for now, right? No action necessary on that until later.
I think we have enough direction at least to kind of tackle a few of those issues and bring them back, and like I said, keep the discussion going and kind of get it narrowed down more to what you guys are wanting.
Thank you. Okay, and so with that, it looks like we can move forward or move on to item 17.
Thank you, Your Honor. Item 17 is your final scheduled matter this evening, which is your regular status and review of proclamation of local emergency for COVID-19. City Council is aware, it made its declaration back on March 17th of 2020 and last took action on this on December 15th, 2020. Obviously, rising cases continue to be a concern in Tulare County. Today's situational report by Tulare County indicated 41,867 positive cases, with a current positivity cases per 100,000 of 79 per 100,000 over a 7-day average metric. as well as continuing rising deaths now with 506 deaths attributed in Tulare County. Obviously, the regional stay-at-home orders were put in place by the state in dealing and making sure that ICUs had critical space available, which in the central San Joaquin Valley region, to which Tulare County is a part of, it continues to be 0% ICU beds available. In Tulare County right now, there are 208 hospitalized individuals with 26 people in the ICU. Vaccinations has become an important point now, and according to the county's report earlier today, it has received 26,925 vaccines, and it has administered 7,984. So essentially 19,000 vaccines have been received that have yet to be administered. I do know that there's monumental efforts to try to get that out to the eligible folks, which right now they call it tiers, phase 1, tier 1B, which is where they've transitioned to now, which in large part childcare and educators is who they are trying to address, as well as the state made eligible those 65 and older. So that's where large outreach is right now, is in the education sector, in hopes of bringing school back into session by February, and as well as to reach those age 65 and older as vulnerable populations. Under the project, and the Vice Mayor earlier talked about Project Room Key, which is providing housing to those that are homeless during the pandemic. The Tulare County still reports 116 rooms that it has under contract, which 76 of them are currently occupied. So by their records, there are 40 rooms that are unoccupied that are currently under contract. In terms of face covering enforcement, additional efforts continue with that, including additional efforts by code enforcement, which has made a total of 9 business-oriented enforcement and documented enforcement actions. And the police department has 40 individual enforcement actions, including 1 arrest that resulted from a dispute that became physical. PDC has been activated, as the council's aware, as an alternative care site, and by its last report from yesterday, had its highest patient load, which currently stands at 14. There's, I believe, 150 beds that is prepared for. So right now, the patient count is 14 at that facility. Testing continues to be one of the important factors in the COVID response. Veterans Memorial Building continues to serve as a daily basis for scheduled testing. And then as spoken about earlier, and thanks to the Ad Hoc Committee for its time spent in defining sites, Heritage Center is being used right now on a weekly basis as a community testing site, with the hopes of being able to test on a weekly basis, upwards of 1,500 to 2,000 folks. Looking to scale up in that regard. Switching to kind of the state of financial means, since your last meeting, President Trump had signed a $900 billion COVID relief bill, which did not account for local government within it, which would include counties and cities. It focused on individual payments as well as business assistance. And so you've seen recently the payroll protection program was reopened. In addition, even those that had been awarded previously were made eligible to again apply for the PPP program, as well as first-time appliers. President-elect Biden has unveiled his federal support legislation, which is a $1.9 trillion package, which within it includes a $350 billion program for local government. It isn't clear yet what its distribution would be. The council will recall under the CARES Act that there was direct funding to cities under the CARES Act, for those at a 500,000 population or more. And then if you were less than a 500,000 population, funds were distributed to states, and then states did an additional distribution formula, which in the end, from the CARES Act that happened earlier this in 2020, resulted in the city of Porterville receiving 740,000. I think it's fair to assume that through federal legislation, something comparable to what was from the original CARES Act is probably going to find its way. There's going to, my guess is that when I say my guess, and from what I'm reading and conjecture from the National League of Cities and the California League of Cities, is that there'll be a breakoff point, probably again at a 500,000 or 1 million for direct to cities, and then the remainder will go to states for redistribution to support communities. And so we'll wait to see how the state of California redistributes I call it CARES Act funding. It will have a different name, whatever President-elect Biden's package is that he has proposed. Which kind of brings to the state that Governor Newsom announced early this month that early returns on the state budget are better than expected. In fact, projected a $25 billion surplus in the current fiscal year after a lot of conjecture about using the rainy day fund and those sorts of things. So actually replenished the rainy day fund and is running a surplus. He's made it a priority to fund education as well as provide, as he states, COVID assistance. When the city council last met back in December, there was much talk about the $500 million small business mini grant program, which ultimately ended up being unveiled December 30th. There was a week and a half application program that closed on January 13th. There will be a second round of funding. It is competitive. There is an application process. And it's competitive for those dollars. There's been given the surplus of the state, there's been conjecture that there will be additional business assistance funds made available through the state, and that would be in addition to any federal assistance that might be forthcoming. So obviously a lot of federal and state resources being discussed in the absence of that actually being on the ground right now, as I shared with the inauguration tomorrow and the meeting, the federal assistance, as I spoke about, is probably a month away or more. And then certainly the state legislative process. So some cities have begun making independent self-funded programs, and highlighted in your staff report is just one of them. That city of Whittier is an example. It's down in Los Angeles County. They developed a city larger than Porterville. It's about 85,000. But they developed a small business assistance program, mini grant program. They allocated $500,000 and came up with a schedule on how they wish to just distribute those funds and such. So provided that is one example of how a local government's getting involved, just given the uncertainty, even though there's lots of promises and lots of discussion about assistance, kind of finding it hard to what that time frame is going to be before it finds its way into communities. And then kind of just speaking to the city, we provide a monthly update. Maria's kind enough to kind of update the numbers for us. So you'll find in regards to the city's utilities that now, based on the executive order that there is not water turnoffs during the pandemic, that the city's utilities now are owed in combination approximately $1.2 million. How that's broken down is a little bit more than $500,000 owed to the water fund, 333,000 to sewer, and 300,000 to refuse. And that's not including late fees, which were waived by the council by an independent action. Certainly, what I would describe is that is at least double and approaching triple what would be the normal experience for outstanding obligations to, or unpaid utilities, just for scale. So instead of looking at 1.2 million on a kind of rolling basis, it's typically no more than 400,000. With that, happy to answer any questions, and it would be staff's recommendation that the city council make a finding of continuing need for local declaration of local emergency, as well as happy to answer any questions or consistent with any direction deemed appropriate by the council.
Councilmember Carrillo, do you have any questions about that item?
No, I don't. Sorry, I was stuck on mute.
Councilmember Stowe?
No, I don't, Your Honor.
Councilmember Peñalosa?
Yes, I do, Your Honor. I was going to quickly ask. I know that today I saw that there was a promotion or a advertisement regarding testing site. I know that was on our Parks and Leisure page. I was curious to know how is that? Is that the first? I mean, I don't know if it's the first one that I've seen being promoted, but is our social media promotion, that's the main avenue for folks to know about getting tested, and that site in particular? I think it was a heritage center that was being promoted. I was just curious to know, is that going to continue in the future? How many more days? And definitely want to make sure that we can get more folks tested, because that's going to help us at the end of the day to make sure that the more negative tests, the better potentially we can open up, maybe. But yeah.
Yeah, and I want to give credit where credit's due here. Thank you for, and this is what I was referencing earlier about Heritage Center being used as a testing site. So initially, this was born from us wanting to continue to have city staff tested. And we've had as the council's aware, had an incentive program to have employees test, which we've been averaging not quite 100, less than 100 employees test on a regular, on a weekly basis. Tulare County has an interest to expand that testing to include the community, but doesn't have the employees to be able to support that. The employees they have dedicated right now to testing across Tulare County is 5. So at any individual testing location, they are providing 3 employees, which supports about 500 tests, say at the most. So the city has committed staff as well. So today we had Parks and Leisure Services, both library and Park and Leisure Services staff assisting with collection. And there's been conversations with Porterville Unified about including some of their staff as well to continue to scale up so that we could offer 1,500 or even 2,000 tests on a week. And again, this would only be on a weekly basis, or 1 day a week. They call it Porterville Tuesday. And here's what I would say. Regular testing is only occurring in Porterville on Tuesdays and Visalia on Wednesdays. The other days that the county, given the limited resources they have, the county has other testing opportunities are moving around the county. But the only fixed days are in Porterville now on Tuesdays and Visalia. There will be the county will soon be taking possession of a mobile testing bus. It's literally a bus that serves as a walk-up testing facility with multiple testing stations. They have a platform that you come up upon. I believe there's 4 testing sites around the bus. It's walk-up testing, and preliminary conversations have been that would be coming to Porterville the first week of February. We're still working out again, Tulare County does not yet have possession of it, but one of the first places it would come to would be Porterville. And so we're looking at what its location would be. It would be fixed for that entire week, and it would be open from 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. That week that it's here. So we are targeting the first week of February for that, with a site to be determined. It could be at the Heritage Center as well. So we're working through some of the logistics of that. Its purpose would be obviously 12 hours a day for 5 days a week. So that 60, 70 hours, it would be available is to try to test as many folks during that week as possible. And then it will move to another location within the county. But happy to hear that it will find its way to Porterville. One of the first stops it will make in Tulare County will be in Porterville the first week of February. And we will, and your question about promoting, unfortunately, the county doesn't isn't promoting these pop-up sites as they call them. So it's fallen back on the city, I guess you would say, to promote. This was the first time we have promoted that in the community because it's not more dedicated to city staff than anything else. And now I would say in coordination with the ad hoc committee, said we would like to do this for the benefit of the community, but it's going to take resources from the city as well as perhaps the school district to scale this up to be able to better support the community and to also move it around the community. So I would anticipate this potentially being at Granite Hills High School, Menachie High School, Porterville High School, Heritage Center, just different locations to try to provide ease and access to testing on a weekly basis. Easy to remember, Porterville, Tuesdays in Porterville. You know, there was Tuesdays with Maury, there will be Tuesdays in Porterville for testing.
How many sites are there Tuesdays in Porterville?
Just one.
Is that the Heritage Center, or is it the Veterans Hall as well, or?
Well, the Veterans Hall is a separate, that is a regular testing site. It's under a separate contract with the state called Optum. That is operated under a separate contract. This is a 1 day a week they call it pop-up testing. It's here for 1 day from 9 to 3 o'clock, and then it moves to another community the next day. So as I shared, Tuesdays, kind of Tuesdays with Maury or Tuesdays in Porterville, we will have testing in Porterville. Right today, it was at the Heritage Center, and it may be there again next week. Those are conversations that are ongoing with the school district about scaling up, and a lot of that has to do with does Santa Fe return to school next Monday? There's a lot of questions that education has right now. The governor came out with some additional guidance the end of last week that the school districts are still sorting through in terms of reopening and opening. And there is a potential. I can't speak for the school districts. They're working through that guidance that the governor introduced.
If you're speaking with Tim quite a bit, if I can make a suggestion to him, if they make that at one site consistently, so it'll be consistent, so people won't have to be guessing and missing it, when it comes to Porterville. Because if we move it from place to place, I think it's going to get lost and we won't have that many testing. But if they know it's at that site every Tuesday and at such time, they will make it there.
Yeah, I would say that's part of. Here, I completely agree with you. We're creatures of habit. This community testing site was initially, and the county was promoting it at Government Plaza, and then they closed that at the end of December. And in fact, they asked for city staff to help assist, even as it was at Government Plaza to assist, because they were short-staffed at that testing site at the end of December. We felt it was important enough at the city to continue testing our staff and making that available. So we had Fire Station 2 served as that testing site the first Tuesday of January. It was then that that just had operational challenges, to be candid with you. The fire department was doing training out there, and it just wasn't a good mix of testing and public safety purpose. So again, in collaboration with the ad hoc committee, talked about other sites, and Heritage Center was one. We coordinated with Porterville Unified. I did personally with Nate Nelson to talk through that, and very supportive of it. And so that's why it's at Heritage Center right now. It has ease of circulation, and I would say that is where it is now. But this is where you have some populations in the Porterville area that are of focus, and I'll use East Porterville as an example, and that's why Granite Hills comes into the conversation. How many, and I don't have this data, but the county does, in terms of where folks are, where they reside, because you can provide your home address as part of the testing registration, and they are trying to, because remember, one of the metrics is those quartiles, bottom quartiles, and East Porterville is one of those significant populations that are in our county's metrics for reopening that have to be there. And part of that is testing and its positivity. So how many people are testing and what's their positivity rate? And so when you ask, does it move around? I would say that is the county's interest, so that you can provide, especially in the East Porterville area. Porterville College was being looked at as a testing location. That is currently off the board right now because Porterville College is going to be used as a vaccination site.
Well, in another way, if we want to get, a lot of the people at East Porterville, then we should go to West Putnam School. I think that would be a site that, most people, in that area go to because their kids are elementary school. I don't know if they have the room or not, but that's the most ideal site because it gets the most traffic, foot traffic and car traffic because of elementary.
Yeah, Councilman, I don't disagree with that having it at Heritage Center consistently wouldn't be a bad idea. The only challenges come is if Santa Fe returns to school, that there may be it may not be a good fit in that site between having that as a community testing site and school in person. And that's something that I'm in daily communication with the superintendent, Dr.
I'm sorry, I said West Putnam, I meant Doyle.
Yeah, and it could be. But the problem with elementary schools is that they may be back in session. So the high schools likely will not be, and that's where the high schools end. So it could be perhaps at Porterville High School. That's just an active conversation that is going on between he and myself about what's the best to try to support the community as well as not interfere with school operations. And again, they've been thrown a curveball because they got additional guidance at the end of last week.
I think also, Councilmember Stowe, the ad hoc committee's ideas and at least what we report out to has been based on, the easiest locations for people to get in and out without a disturbing traffic patterns. But more than that is the scalable on the response that we'll get. And so looking at, as a small area, if there's too many people coming, that we're able to scale up to larger areas to serve the people, and not so much as moving around as much as I think that the county had first recommended. I think they maybe were looking for the pop-up mentality just because it was something more of a buzzword that's happening that people would understand, but having it in a reliable location, but adjusting to scalability, I think is something that the ad hoc committee has always kind of looked at from the perspective of not only when the testing came up, but any other activities that we would have to do. So I think that if we can maintain that path like that you suggested, and as well with the ad hoc committee, I think that we'll be able to maintain an element of ultra local control on how we're able to function for our constituents.
Well, I just think moving around is not a very good idea because we know how the county's been communicating about this, and people are trying to get the vaccination now and they don't know where to get it from because there's no information out there. I get several calls a day. Where can I get my vaccination? And I'm thinking, well, I know they have the Ag Center, but I don't know what days. I know they're going to do it at Porterville College, but I'm not sure what days. And these are elderly people that they don't get on the computer. They read the paper, they listen to the radio. I mean, it's hard. I mean, well, I shouldn't say that. A lot of them are on the computer, but but it's hard to navigate that once you get on the computer. So I just it's extremely hard, especially for elderlies, and they want to get everyone vaccinated and make it simple as possible. They're not making it simple.
I think too that as the destigmatization happens, as people start to be less thinking less negatively and more engaged in the process of doing it, as the city manager mentioned, I think we'll see the information start to become a little bit more free flowing, and people discussing just exactly your point. I think we're at a strange point. This is just my opinion, that we're at a strange crossroads of of the information needing to get out and wanting to get out, but people are maybe questioning how to get the information out. So my hope is yours.
Yeah, because it's very hard. You know, I got my first shot, and I haven't got confirmation if they received that. You know, that I got my first shot. I haven't got an appointment date or anything yet. So I don't even know if I did it right, because it doesn't tell you. Okay, we got it. You're in. It's confirmed. But so you just keep on your phone trying to like, okay, am I doing this right? But I never get any confirmation. But you know, they need to make it as simple as possible. And I think moving it around from place to place is, you know, it just makes it harder, especially if we don't have the right communication.
But Vice Mayor, did you have any comments?
No, I didn't have any comments. I was listening to a lot because the testing and the vaccinations, and both are equally as important. And the information, I know that there are several people that have been tested numerous times, and now they're just waiting for the moment for the vaccinations to arrive and so that they can be tested. But no, there's a lot that has been going on in the community to that regard, because I too have gotten questions as to where do I go get my test? And so far I just send them the link that was provided so they can sign up for their test.
When you say test or vaccine?
Vaccine, I apologize.
Okay. I was,
Thank
I
you
want
for
to be
that.
clear, where the city is not doing vaccines.
No,
They're doing testing.
yeah, but
Which is an important point. You know, once you have received the vaccine, it's a two-part process, and even then, they'll tell you after you receive the vaccine, the second part of the series, essentially, it's supposed to be a really active then 7 days after that second shot. Even then, it's still encouraged to continue to receive testing because I think they're estimating it's 95% effective. So. I call it belt and suspenders approach. Get the vaccine, but continue to test to ensure. I really like Councilmember Stowe saying I use it frequently now. Stay positive, test negative.
mhm.
We'll need a motion and a second to continue the declaration of emergency. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Make
I-
that motion. Oh,
Go ahead.
all right, Vice Mayor. I'll make a motion to continue the declaration of emergency ordinance.
No second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Please, unless there's any more discussion, please have the roll call vote, or yeah, the roll call, please.
Councilmember Carrillo, Councilmember Carrillo.
Frozen, I think.
Okay, we can come back to that. Councilmember Peñalosa.
So I think I'll say aye, but I think Councilmember Carrillo is back.
Councilmember Carrillo.
Sorry, I keep freezing up.
Nope. Councilmember Stowe.
Aye.
Vice Mayor Flores.
Aye.
Mayor Reyes.
Aye. Passes 5-0. Thank you. And that brings us to oral communications, or communications in general.
Your Honor, the time right now is 8:37 p.m. and we have received no additional public.
This evening.
Councilmember Stowe?
Just a couple of things, Your Honor. I want to congratulate all the representatives at the tribal council that got elected and reelected. Yeah, congrats to them. And I, as I mentioned, I did get my first shot of the COVID, and I would highly recommend anyone that's 65 and over and fits in the category and the phases that they are now to do so. There's so many people that are balking at the idea because they want to, they're not sure about the, vaccination, the vaccine. But from what I hear, the vaccine is, the after effects or side effects is much less than if you get COVID, because that will stick with you. And according to my doctors at UCLA, they've have proof now that that will linger with you for a long, long time and may even affect you the rest of your life. So, so I would urge everyone and to plead with them to get the vaccination when you get the opportunity to do so.
Thank you. Councilmember Peñalosa.
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, I just want to kind of, I know it's, we have a presidential inauguration happening tomorrow. So congratulating both our president-elect Joe Biden and Vice President, first female Vice President in our country, historic. And just, congratulating them on tomorrow's direction. The next 4 years. So every 4 years, we get the opportunity to elect our president, and hope that we can continue to come together as a country. And I know it's very divisive, from my experience these last couple of years. But I can only hope and wish the best for our country as a whole, our state, as well as our city. So, yeah, that's all.
Thank you. Vice Mayor.
I want to say congratulations to the newly elected on the Tule River Tribal Council, and I look forward to continued working with them. And I want to say that there's a lot of things that are going on. I will not be able to participate on the Homeless Task Force Committee meeting tomorrow because I will be I have a conflict with that one. LAFCO will be meeting tomorrow, and talk about a busyness. There will be 7 public hearings scheduled for that one meeting tomorrow. So that one's going to be interesting. With the Council of Cities, the next meeting isn't going to be until March 17th, but I wanted to share because it is important. The last 2 meetings that have been canceled, but back in September, our city manager did ask after one of our council meetings that we talked about the illegal fireworks for discussion at a future Council of Cities meeting. Well, that was done back in September. We anticipated that it'd be on the November 18th agenda, but the meeting has canceled, and here again, it got canceled. And we won't be having a meeting on the 20th. So the next meeting is not until March the 17th. And I merely wanted to state that. I know it wasn't done in the morning, but to continue to pray for the public safety, for the all firemen and for the all law enforcement officers, but for the overall protection and the safety of everyone in and our surrounding communities. I know that there are a lot of families who are in pain that have lost a family member or a friend due to natural causes, a tragedy, in particularly COVID, and for everyone just to stay safe and follow the protocols so that we can do have a reopening soon. But that's all I have to say.
Okay, thank you. And I too want to congratulate those that were elected as new representatives or re-elected for the Tule River Tribal Council. And I'll ask, I have 2 wishes. I don't know if wishes are allowed during other matters, but the first one, I think, and I'll just extend it to the next meeting, in which case I'll probably wish for it again, which is for peace and calm as people are able to move through their lives and observe the happenings that we're all going to be watching with the inauguration and everything else. And just remember that if we have peace and calm, we'll be able to think rationally about things that happen. And the second wish is that I wish the state would consider those who've been some of the most affected, which are the licensed individuals who are licensed in things, not medicine, but have training in the study of bacteriology and viruses and transmissibility. And those are the licensed professionals that are not able to operate currently. And I'm talking about nail technicians, barbers, cosmetologists, estheticians. These folks have training on personal contact and what to look for and how to operate and conduct themselves on a daily basis and multiple occasions on a day and not transmit or even recognize the hazards of doing that. And when I hear about our staff, Parks and Leisure staff who are courageously engaging in this benefit to the community to have testing, I wish that the state would see the benefit of engaging those who have put hours and hours of study and training into a profession that's been terribly affected by this pandemic. And we're so much so that the profession almost seems like it's not essential, but when they've put in not only the money behind the training, but the hours of training, in some cases 1,600 hours just to be able to conduct their job, I think that engaging them in these activities of testing would be wise going forward, or even any help. And as they've waived licensing fees for these folks. And if that's something they want to do as a way to compensate or encourage participation, or just tell them that there is a value to what they're doing, I think would be something that the state should consider. So those are my two thoughts and what I have to say. And I appreciate you all taking the time to listen. And with that, we'll move into the remainder of closed session. But I don't know if we'll have anything reportable at the end.
No action anticipated to be reported. Thank you.
Okay, so then we'll move into closed session, but the next meeting of the City Council will be February 2nd. And hope to see you all there. Thank you.
If I may, Mayor.
Yeah.
Just
Oh, I'm
one-
sorry. I'm sorry.
No.
I forgot your.
No, I just want I don't know if all the council got but a very unusual circumstance for January, and I do want to bring this up. So, and Mike Knight can better articulate this than I, but we today did an unusual thing in sending a patrol unit and fire personnel to Northern California, where there are a number of fires that have been ignited in January, and it's usually fire season ends in November, as you get to the 1st of December. Mike Knight made a comment to me that based on current precipitation trends, we have had the driest, help me, Mike, you told me this, but I want to accentuate this, and I should have mentioned this as part of the water, but it fits in line with extraordinary fire activity that's happening right now, and a mutual aid occurring in the middle of January in Northern California. But they are saying this is the driest winter in 130 years. So certainly in fact, I just raised this, that, we still are dealing with an emergency drought declaration. You still have it on your agenda from 2016, and it will not surprise us if there's another drought emergency that comes from 2021. So I just raised that we have fire personnel that are in Northern California, a dozen fires that have sparked up there today. And so hopefully, certainly thoughts with them and their safety, but then also, it certainly is looking like a very dire drought conditions developing in California in 2021.
With that being said, I'm glad you mentioned that, because I just put in artificial turf throughout my yard. Is there a tax deduction for that now? Or grant? No, I'm just kidding.
You get to golf on it.
Well, I've been doing that, so thank you. That's my perk, I guess.
Okay, thank you, everyone, and we'll move to closed session, but the meeting will be adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you.